We are very proud to announce that we have partnered with Rent Ready as our first official sponsor/partner for the Weekly Juice podcast. Are you new to investing? Wondering whether or not you can self-manage your properties? Let us tell you about Rent Ready. Rent Ready is a really awesome property management software that can help you grow and handle every aspect of your real estate business. Rent collection, tenant screening, maintenance, lease signing, listing. Honestly, it has everything.
Yeah, how long do you think we've been using Rent Ready for ourselves?
About 5 months.
Yeah, about 5 months. It's been awesome. We do use their push notification system to send notifications to tenants. We collect rent from our tenants right through the app. And we're actually about to use their new feature, their 24/7 maintenance software called Latchel. And a Latchel will allow you to remove yourself as the landlord, as the middleman between your tenants and maintenance calls. So the tenants can directly call a maintenance line and they will dispatch contractors right to the property.
We should also mention that Rent Ready is unlimited. All their plans are flat price. This essentially means you can keep adding properties to your portfolio without having to pay more. You can close on all the properties you want, and Rent Ready's price stays the same. The best part is Rent Ready's given us an amazing deal to pass on to our Weekly Juice listeners. You guys, everyone listening, can get 50% off a Rent Ready plan at rentready.com when you use our code JUICEPOD. That's RENTREDI.com with code JUICEPOD. JUICEPOD at rentready.com, and you can get 50% off any plan.
There's enough income there. Like, I get nervous. Like, if I had one of those $200 a month property, it's like, your water heater goes, like, that could be, a year's worth of income. So it's like, we want to try to find properties that, they may take us longer to acquire, but like once we acquire them, they'll hopefully just be, solid, strong performers for us.
It's very cool. So our first few properties, we didn't put any work into them. We got lucky with one where it's really high cash flow. Other ones are like standard cash flow. I mean, we're realizing as we're doing these renovations now, it's like, oh, this is how you really force the equity. And then you can play around with it.
Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today we had on special guests Nick and Sam Riccio. They're a husband and wife real estate investing team out of Boston, Massachusetts. They have an awesome story. They're 28 and 30. Nick started out as working in insurance, and then Sam worked in marketing. They both transitioned to essentially jobs within the real estate industry.
Yep.
Sam went on to be a GC, and then Nick went on to be a loan officer, and it's helped propel their business to greater heights. And they've had an absolute incredible time so far in the real estate industry with, I think you can talk about, but
like what an equity run they've had. They've only purchased 3 properties, but they've built so much equity in these properties. And this episode is really for the people out there. And we know we have a lot of listeners like this that live in a Philadelphia market, that live in a New York market, that live in a San Francisco market or a Boston market. And they think they think that they can't invest in properties in their existing markets because it's too inflated and too expensive. And this couple's doing it. Like they're investing in up and coming neighborhoods, seeing appreciation from 650,000 to 950,000 in like a couple years. A lot of, a lot of research goes into that. So it's not just like happens overnight, but they're living proof that you can invest in a really expensive market. And it's a different episode for us. It's a little bit longer, but it talks about a lot of facets of the real estate game and not just specifically cash flow.
Yeah, we go into the most fun was going into the rehabs and kind of how they leverage their general contracting license and different things they learn along the way, and kind of walks you through a potential couple of deals if you decide to go that route and decide to go the reno route.
And Sam talks about how to get your GC license too, so which she loves. Now she's taking on other clients. So very cool episode. I think stay for the whole game, people. It's a long one, but we really get into it.
Yes. If you want to hear their story about how they just acquired $375,000 in equity on a massive deal, this is another intriguing facet of the show. So stay for the whole time. It gets really, really hot and heavy on about the 40-minute mark.
Okay, let's rock.
Nick and Samantha, officially welcome to the Weekly Juice. We are so excited to have you on and can't wait to share your story with our listeners.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So we know you both are avid real estate investors currently. Can you walk us through the inception of like why you dove into real estate and how you transitioned to be investors?
Yeah. So I think it started. So I should probably start. We got together. Sam was like 14 or 15. I was 16 or 17. And I came from like an entrepreneurial family. So I kind of always had that bug and that side of it.
Nothing to do with real estate.
Nothing to do with real estate. But, I had that piece to it. And then I think I always saw like my family, being self-employed, it was always like either things were amazing and we were living like kings, or things were terrible. And it was like, truly like, are we going to eat this week? It was that like, fluctuation. So I saw that side of it. And I think for me, I just like got obsessed with trying to find a way to like, one, make sure that would never happen. And then two, like I always wanted to be able to control my own destiny and not have like a job dictate that. And then, so I think started like a lot of people, like Googling, like, how do you get wealthy? Like, from a business standpoint, and like real estate always comes up. And I just got, I was obsessed with it. I have that personality trait that I become obsessive over things.
Oh, you're not like us at all. So that's
And then it was from that point, it was like, all right, now, like try to get Sam on board, which I know everyone goes through at some point.
Yeah. But the difference between him trying to get me on board and like other probably couples trying to start into real estate is like, I was like 16 and he's telling me we're going to be a landlord. I'm like, dude, I live with my parents. Like, I don't even pay bills. Like, so he started early, like planting the seed. I think it was basically once we were in college living on our own, I was like, okay, I get it. Like I can see how this can happen. But there was, years prior, like he started early, and, which was good for me because I needed that. And then finally, when we were graduating college, I think we had the choice to make of how are we going to make this happen once we both were like, okay, we want to do this. And we decided to move into his parents' basement after graduation and start saving every dollar we had. And I was making a solid $28,000 a year at my marketing job, which was, to me, it was money, but
yep.
We didn't have much to save. So we saved up for about a year and then bought our first property.
Awesome. Great. So just some context. How old are you two now?
I'm 28.
I just turned 30 last week.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Congratulations. Big 3-0. We're on the same. We're 29 and 32. So we feel you. We're right there. So when you were living in your parents' basement, I guess, can you talk about your previous W-2 jobs? You were in marketing, Sam and Nick. What were you doing at the time?
I was in the insurance industry.
Okay. And then how soon after that you were living in your parents' basement and then saving up for the first property did you transition to your next positions?
Yeah. So we stayed in those types of jobs for a while. So what we did was, Sam was in her marketing position, not like at the same company or anything, but similar type of role, just kind of going up the chain over the years. I was in, same thing. I was in the same field, just progressing up the ladder sort of. And then really what allowed us, I think, to make our change was the investments that we had already made. So once we were able to cover all of our living expenses through just our couple properties, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that was when we were like, okay, now it's kind of like we're comfortable or somewhat comfortable with taking the leap to now, not having the safety net of that W-2 job.
So the answer to the question is mid-global pandemic in 2020, we both decided to quit our jobs and have no income.
Sounds smart.
Renovating a property at like $150,000 renovation. But
it's like jumping off the cliff and building the parachute on the way down. I love it. I mean, I think it's great.
So can you talk,
as long as you can build it?
Can you take us through the journey of your first essentially living and renovating? I believe it's Nick's parents' basement, and that's where you guys stayed. And then each property along the way to where you got to now. And then, I want to talk about your biggest rental that you're currently, I think you just finished up actually.
Yeah.
So the first one we did was right after that. So we had saved up, and it was 2017. Yeah. In Boston, every market was insanely hot, but in Boston, the big challenge was, we were trying to get a house hack in Boston on a multifamily, and the dynamic of the neighborhood had changed quite a bit. And there really wasn't, a lot of investors were no longer looking for rental properties. What they were doing was buying them and converting them to condos. So the big thing was condo conversions, and that kind of ultimately screwed us because they could pay so much more because they were then rezoning the property and selling it. And we were just looking for cash flow, which was really, really hard. So we had truly, I feel like a neighborhood changing, and the whole thing with cash buyers, all that. So we had a ton of problems, and basically what that led us to was what we felt like was the next best thing. So we bought a condo in a really emerging neighborhood of Boston, which is East Boston. And at the time was pretty underdeveloped, but, every house was being remodeled. So it was like that type of neighborhood. So we bought there, bought that for like $325,000, which it wasn't a rental, wasn't a house hack. Now we still own it. And then you can talk about how we got to the next property.
Yeah. So purchased that. We thought we'd be there for a while, which is the theme of our life. We'll stay here for a while.
So you were living there. It was not a, it was.
Yeah. It wasn't a rental. So basically our thought was, we want to move. We're ready. We had gotten, dozens of offers declined at that point. And it was like, honestly, we were fatigued. We were like, this looks good. We know it's going to appreciate. It's a good price. At least this can get us started, get us, used to the area, and let's see what happens. And it's funny because now looking back, it makes sense as to why it happened. But in the moment, it was more of like we're just going to jump in and see how this goes. But so not soon after, probably like 7 months after we purchased and moved into that condo, I became friendly with the woman on the first floor next door. So the house from the outside looked like a six units, if you will. It's attached on one side. One side was the 3 condos, and we were on the first floor. The other side was a 2-family, which was a tenanted on the bottom, and then a owner occupied on the top 2 floors. And I became friendly with that tenant, super sweet, talked to her bunch of times. And then lo and behold, Nick goes on a business trip, and she texts me one day and was like, I have to move. My landlord's selling the house. I'm so nervous. I have nowhere to live, basically. And I was like, can I have your landlord's cell phone number? I actually think I'm going to give him a call. So I reached out, basically said, I'm your neighbors on the other side, really interested in the property. And this was, pre him even listing it or thinking about listing it. He obviously had
best time to get in.
Yeah, exactly. So we chatted back and forth for a little bit. He told me he was thinking of listing the property around $650, I think it was. I basically was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let me talk to my husband or boyfriend at the time. We start going over negotiations, and we actually, fun fact, we flew to Florence, Italy for a vacation that was planned. So we're negotiating overseas, and we counted once or twice, and we landed on what was it? 6:30. We landed on 6:30, and he accepted our offer the day we were flying out, which was one day before Nick proposed. So we flew home with a new house, 30 days to move, and a wedding to pay for.
Wow.
So what? Yeah. So what next? How do you pay for it?
Yeah, that was a tough one. And we weren't budging on the wedding thing. We're like, we've been dating since we were 14. It's time to have the wedding, but also time to do this renovation. So you want to go through the renovation budget really quick, or how we went through that?
So we got that under agreement. So we literally just, we closed on it and just started dragging our furniture just next door. And so we moved in, and as Sam mentioned, so it was a 2-family owner occupied on the 2nd and 3rd level. And when we were looking at it, we, quickly running the numbers, realized like it would be better off as a 3-family, smaller unit. So 3, converting it from a 2-family to a 3-family. So we did that. So we took it from the 2-family to the 3-family.
While living in it,
which was, as everyone knows, it's very, very, very interesting. We had like one working outlet for a couple months at a time. So that was,
it's like the fridge or the microwave, you decide.
We had the whole 2x4 wall with plastic stapled up. We had one little safe room.
Yeah.
But we did that. So we renovated that property, took it from the 2 to the 3. We did that for about 85,000. Most of it we did ourselves. So we did a lot of the work ourselves, help from my father, and then just subbed out like the trades. So plumbing, electric, stuff like that.
There's a lot going on in my head here. And one of the reasons is because when you throw out numbers like $630,000, the majority of people are thinking like, how do you even afford to pay for this? Like, how what was your strategy of using the money that you made from your W-2 jobs? And like, can you walk us through some of the details of, did you finance the renovations? I know you said you did most of it. Can you just give us some details there on how, especially being in the Northeast,
Yeah. So we, so it was owner occupied. So we did a low down payment. We used FHA. I think we put down 5% on it.
Yeah.
And then we funded the rehab ourselves. Mostly. So we were trying to fund the rehab, just did the down payment, all that. So
did the down payment for our condo, not 7 months prior. So I was like, we were not ready for this.
So as you're probably thinking, the bank account is at this point pretty dry.
And then the wedding.
Yeah. And we're also trying to pay for that. So we've self-funded most of it, but then what we did, we were able to get a personal line of credit that helped basically get us over the finish line for it.
Awesome. And that was like personal line as in like a family member, something like that?
Oh, sorry. No, that was like we couldn't sleep at night. And this is another kind of funny story. We worked at the time, like a couple blocks away. I texted Sam at lunch. I'm like, hey, meet me outside. So she comes down. I'm like, I already talked to the bank down the street. Like, we're going to get a line of credit. We just got to sign some papers. So it was a line of credit from a bank.
Nearly fell over. I was like, are you sure? And he's like, this is the only way we're going to get this renovation done. We just have to do it. I went back to my dad and I was like shaking.
Oh, geez. So that's cool though. So you essentially, that was paying for a living, right? Just to cover until you got back up to speed or sea level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So just to kind of catch everybody up here, so essentially right out of college, you guys renovated and kind of fixed up Nick's parents' basement. You lived there. Then you purchased a condo in Boston. You also became friendly with the tenant of essentially your next door neighbor.
Yep.
Found out that their landlord was looking to sell. You ended up purchasing that property. You renovated it for 85. And now you own 2 properties, but you're living in one. Did you rent out the original condo now midway through this? Okay. What's that rent for?
You rented the original condo when we listed it when we were overseas once he accepted our offer because the loan was contingent on getting that condo filled. So we listed it overseas and we set up like 6 listing appointments for like the day we got back from Italy and showed it, and then ended up like got a wonderful tenant that actually just moved out recently. So we got really lucky with that. But yes, it was like a 2-week or less than turnaround time for that.
Awesome. So there's a lot to unpack here, but I'm just thinking about, it seems very easy to say, hey, we placed a tenant in here overseas, or not. It doesn't sound easy, but like you're saying it quickly. What did you guys do for research purposes? Like, I know you guys were 14 and 15, I guess. So like you probably did the research a long time, but for us, I know placing a tenant, we had to strategize and build out an entire outline and like almost like order of operations of like, okay, what are we going to do here, here, and here? who covered that for you guys, and like, how do you run your ship a little bit?
Yeah, so we did. I mean, a lot of it we got from Bigger Pockets. That was like our, Bible when we were starting out. And I think, why things work so well for Sam and I think it's probably also true in a lot of partnerships, is like I'll do all the research. I'll come up with 10 million ideas and all these systems and all that. But like, only she basically is the either approve or no on all of them. So like, I just keep pushing ideas, and she vets like which ones are good, which one aren't. So
what's his ratio of good idea to not good idea? Like, we got to know.
Oh my God.
It's gotten better.
It's okay.
It's not a good. Okay.
When we were younger, like 17-year-old Nick, it was like 100 bad to 1 good. And I'm not joking. I mean, it was every day. He was like, do you want to open a t-shirt company out of the garage? Like, no.
I thought about that too. I like that.
But now I'll give him 5 bad ideas to 1 good.
That's pretty good. 20%. That's not, yeah.
But so like I would do a lot of the research. We would kind of figure things out and beforehand, and she really helped us be prepared, because I think, it sounds easy, clear. Obviously it's not. And a lot of time and research goes into it. And I think also part of it is like, I talk to a lot of people who are looking to get started, which I'm sure we all do. And you never feel like you're ready, right? It's like you're never gonna feel like you're completely ready or enough. But if you put in the time and enough research, which we did, that like you just kind of perform when you're forced to.
Yeah, and
I think that's a really great point. Go ahead.
And I also think, I think at the time we were humming and hawing back and forth over, for just tenant-based background checks. Should we pay for this? Is it worth it? And we did. I think we shelled out a little bit of money and paid for a full background check and a full, I forget what else we did, but credit check. And it was absolutely, now of course we do it, but starting out on the first one, I remember having that, like, should we do this? Like, I mean, we need the $75 right now. And it's like, that's the decisions that you have to make to cover yourself, because it feels like it's unnecessary when it all comes back great. But when you get that one tenant that maybe, you should have run something and you didn't, that's kind of when you kick yourself. So I think that's a big part too.
I think a lot of people, so for me, I know working with a realtor is easy in a way of like, I can lean on he or she for everything almost, right? Like, okay, I need a contractor for this. We need an appraiser. I have a question for title, and I just need a resource, right? Like a good realtor will essentially have a bucket of people that you can pick from. Some are good, some aren't great, but at least it gives you the direction to keep going down the line. This is super interesting because you're overseas, you come back and you purchase this property from your, let's just call it like a friendly landlord or the one that you know. Was this like for sale by owner? Like you didn't deal with a realtor at all, correct?
Correct.
So can you walk us through that? Like what the differences you've seen between working with a realtor and not working with a realtor?
Yeah, I mean, so surprisingly, it went smoothly. And I think a lot of it, like we kind of guided, like the gentleman that we bought it from was like truly like a, what do they call it? Like an accidental landlord. Yeah. Like he just happened to buy the house. Like he wasn't looking to, make it a business or anything like that.
The majority of landlords, right?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. So we kind of really, I feel like helped pull that through. We also had, we had a really good attorney who helped us. Our lender, actually, which is funny enough, like now I work for him years later because we became such good friends and he was such a good resource. Like we just had those two people that had seen these types of deals and, just doing research online, like the types of things we needed to do. And it ended up going really smoothly, but yeah, it was definitely more stressful than if you have the agent who can, they can kind of quarterback a lot of that.
Right. Were you able to negotiate the price down, being that it was like almost like a relationship?
Yeah. So we got it down. So what we did, he wanted like 650. We settled at 630. But the other thing that was like something that was a little new to us at the time too, And our lender was like, you should at least get them to cover closing costs, which was a little foreign to us at that time. So we settled on 630, which was a win for him, but we got $10,000 in closing costs, which was huge.
So he netted 620. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great strategy. And some states are really weird with the laws and whether or not what percentage of it you can do. But anytime you can get that money and keep it in your pocket, especially when you're renovating, that's a really, really, it's just advantageous. So I think the reason why this may resonate with your story may resonate is that a lot of people are probably in your shoes or around an hour like investing timeline, right? Where you're in your first few, maybe half dozen deals, and people can see themselves in you. So if you want to talk about the next step, your next deal, and maybe dive into the specific numbers on it, because I know that you kind of went from a condo to a 2-family, and then price-wise jumped even more, right? You're doing like the stack almost, maybe not with units, but with price. So just dive in. If you could talk about the numbers and everything with your next deal, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah. So after our wedding honeymoon, we came home and we said, all right, it's time. Let's get the next deal. And we started looking in our current area, in that East Boston area, because we were really familiar with the neighborhood. We came to really like it. And after, I don't know, a few months, I think we weren't really finding a lot that was just in our criteria. Now we had a little bit of knowledge. This is what it's going to take to renovate. This is how much this stuff costs. And, this is how basically we had a criteria of this is how much we want to cash flow. And one day I was sitting at my desk at my W-2 and Nick texted me a home in South Boston. So a really up and coming a really developed neighborhood in Boston. I mean, young professionals, it's like 20 to 35. Everybody goes there either right out of college, tons of bars and restaurants. And I mean, I was like, why are you even sending this to me? But it was under $1 million. So I was like, I guess I'll take a look at it. Cause at that point that was like unseen. You don't see things like that. And they had this 2-family. It was a 2-family, 2-bed, 1-bath in each unit. And it was listed for like 960, I think. Yeah. So we're like, all right, you know what, whatever, let's just at least look at it. So at this point we were working with a realtor, and he was actually like a saving grace with this project. Like he knocked it out of the park, which is a good example of why you want to work with a realtor. We texted him, the next day we went and saw the property and we walked it. It was like pitch black outside. We were in the place for 10 minutes and we got to the basement and there was like 9-foot ceilings. And I just looked at Nick and I was like, yep. So once I saw the ceilings, I mean, it was a done deal for us, knowing that we could now expand this footprint. And the house is like about 1,000 square feet ish per floor. So that's a lot of space. So we went to a bar right down the street and put in an offer in an hour. And the seller, and Nick can speak a little bit to this too, but the seller basically had been getting a ton of lowball offers from developers, to Nick's point, of people who want to basically either tear it down and build it up, rezone it for condos. So that wasn't working for them. And they also had a scheduled open house. So this was a Wednesday. We put the offer in. They had a scheduled open house on Saturday. And we came in with our offer at 810, I believe we offered, and basically said, cancel the open house. After like a couple back and forth, we settled on 840 and we had it under agreement prior to Saturday.
Wow. That's quick.
Yeah, that's great. So how did you plan? I want to talk into like your strategy to save up for this, right? I mean, I don't know if you funded it yourself, because even if you live in it, 5% of $840,000, like that's a lot of money. So what was your strategy to save up for it? What was your plans for funding the deal?
Yeah. So we had been able to somehow save quite a bit. And again, I say somehow, but we were really, dedicated to this. So, outside of, things we did, the wedding and stuff obviously was expensive, but other than that, we have and still have like a really tight budget. So yeah, we force a lot of savings and squeeze a lot out of what we earn. So, that we were progressing and we were saving. At that point, our property in East Boston that we had moved out of we forced a good amount of appreciation in it. We bought, like we said, we bought it at 630. It appraised at 950, and we were able to pull a home equity line of credit on it. So when we bought South Boston, we knew we had that for rehab, and I think we used a tiny bit of it for closing.
So we used a little bit of it for down payment, and then we didn't even go into how we like re-renovated the East Boston one, but that's fine. Yeah. So we put a little bit of that line of credit back into the East Boston property because that tenant that had told us about the unit, she was in a really just non-updated unit. And she finally had basically moved out. It was time to redo it. So we used a little bit of that line of credit for that. So we kind of had like a 2-part renovation. And then we finally got our final appraisal after all 3 units were renovated. And we had some leftover funds in that home equity line of credit that we used for the down payment and it helped, jumpstart probably $10,000 of our renovation budget.
Can you talk about home equity line of credits and like kind of dive into this? So I'm just thinking about, you have X amount of equity in this one property number 2, right?
Yeah.
I'll just call it that. I don't know if you're like willing to go into specific numbers, but like say you have a $50,000 line of credit. Like how do you withdraw from that and how do you pay it back? And like, then how do you pump it into the property?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll touch on that. Cause I run it. I talk about these a lot. I'm a huge fan of them. And so we had a plan because ultimately, for listeners, I guess that don't know how they work, is they're almost like acting like a credit card, and you can draw on it in any amount. So say it's $100,000 line of credit, you could take $200, $500, $1,000, and you have to pay it back as you use it.
And you take it in check form.
Check or some. I think some banks, use debit cards. But the big piece to it is that I think at least for 10 years, most of them are interest only, and then they'll amortize, they'll basically be due. So being able to have like that exit strategy or the payback strategy is critical. So we knew that we were going to be able to force the equity. Like we had a really good idea of the amount that we were going to be able to force in. And we knew even conservatively that we were going to be able to cash out, refinance, and pay that back. So that's why we were comfortable using it. Yeah. But I think it's an awesome tool, but you have to like really know how you're using it and have that payback plan.
Mm-hmm. The really cool part about this is that I don't think we've talked to anybody who's used the strategy of buying in up and coming areas. And I don't want to say it's getting lucky, but it's like doing your research to figure out where the up and coming areas are. But to have 300,000 or 200,000 of appreciation in a short period of time is like, it's incredible to be able to draw down on that. But that's essentially your scaling strategy, right? Or it has been, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because like that was like our plan. And we actually, we ended up meeting what we had thought. So it's funny to think about it, to be fortunate, because like when we went into it, like we were like, this is what we need to do to the property. And then we need it to be valued at X. And fortunately, so far we've been pretty close to on. I think like anyone, we've had some overages on rehabs. But as far as values go, I think we've done a pretty good job of always trying to be conservative and then hitting that value.
Yeah.
This is the strategy that is, it's so great because a lot of investors talk about this. And we had David Green on last week, and he talked about how the cash flow versus the appreciation, but also like investors that only think about cash flow. And if you only think about cash flow, you're buying $60,000 properties in areas where you can't get tenants, and it might cash flow $1,200 a month, but are you even getting it because you have so many turnovers or so many problems? You guys are buying $500,000 and $1 million properties, but by force appreciating them, you're getting smacked with, and I say smacked, I mean like in a good way, you're getting hit with this, several $100,000 in equity in your properties right there. And that's the approach of buying really highly valued assets in nice areas. Like it's really wild that you're able to, and that's, I think we're going to get to it, the numbers on this 840,000. Talk about what the type of work you put into it and then what it ended up appraising for. Cause it's like, it's like mind blowing.
Yeah. So we put in, we say 155, 160 about in renovations. And what that consisted of essentially was essentially a full gut to the building. So it had no existing plumbing in the whole building. So we plumbed the whole building. It was heated by gas stoves. So everything was just black, like walls were just soot. So there's 2 gas stoves in the building. So we put in all the plumbing. It was all new electrical. And then we turned the top floor, which was a 2-bed, 1-bath, into a 2-bed, 2-bath. So we added a master, which helped a ton. And that's the unit that we're in currently. And then the unit below us is the first floor. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath, and we kept it as constitutes there. We just kind of changed the layout a little bit, made it, full new kitchen, and made it an open concept kitchen and living. And then that basement, that when we saw it, we knew we put 3 bedrooms and a bathroom down there along with storage. So it's a 5-bed, 2-bath unit, and we rented it for $6,000 a month for 5 people down there.
$6,000 a month. It's like, wow. It's just wild. So in doing that, what did it end up appraising for after you spent? So let me just 840, right? You put 155 in it. So you're in for roughly $1 million. Like, and then what did it end up appraising for?
It appraised at 1.375.
Yeah. So $375,000 of equity. Boom, right there. It's like your net worth just skyrocketed by doing this. And that's a testament to not being afraid to do big deals. Even when you're just getting started, your third deal, you're buying $1 million worth of real estate. It's a lot of people would be scared. I'd be scared, but it's like just running your numbers. It sounds like you've done it enough where you're not too afraid to jump in, and then you kind of learn along the way. Right.
So did you, when you got the new appraisal, did you guys do like a cash out refi by any chance, like to pull some of this money back, or you just have it sitting in there? I'm just so intrigued on this, like the HELOC thing still, because my head's pretty much wrapped around it, but it's like, I want to dive back into that at some point of just like, if you can walk us through the actual steps of like an example of like, okay, we have $100,000 in equity. We pulled out X%, just like this, the payback cycle on that. Cause we're going to be doing that for a few upcoming properties and we haven't done it yet. So
yeah,
selfishly, please tell us what to do.
So what we did we pulled it on the 2-family that we converted to a 3-family. So we pulled it out. I think it was 100,000. And so what we did was it ended up almost biting us a little because it was a little learning curve that we weren't quite aware of. But when we pulled it, when we went to refinance, the lenders had to treat it as, they had to combine both debts, and we weren't able to keep our line of credit, which is what we originally wanted to do. So basically what we did was we did a cash out refinance on that property, but all we did was pay back that home equity line of credit. So basically what we did was we took out a new first mortgage that paid off the existing first and the home equity line. Now we just have the one mortgage, and we essentially cashed out $100,000, but really what we did was just pay back that line of credit.
So that wiped out the credit line. And then
I think we ended up leaving like $5,000 or $8,000 in the deal, essentially, if you play it that way.
Just for a little extra equity, like already paid in there. Why not? Okay, cool. So, and then as far as like, let's just talk you had a credit line of 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So say you have a credit line of 100,000 and like you essentially, I'm curious about just the interest only payments. So say you have, you have to do your basement and it's 20 grand. How long does it take you to pay that back? And like, how long do you have? And is it specifically only interest? Cause it's your cash, cause it's your equity.
Yeah, that's just how they do them. It's interest only for like 10 years. And then I think it's built on they're typically built on like 20-year terms, but the 10 years is interest only. And then it's fully principal and interest. So as far as paying back, I mean, again, we on that one, we finally paid it back with the cash out refinance. I think on the smaller stuff, we've just been able to just kind of pay it back down with our savings. So instead of like rebuilding up our savings, we pay that back and pay it down to nothing.
I think for me, Nick naturally understood this a lot better than I did. So the first time we were looking to pull a HELOC, I was asking 100 questions. How much money is it going to be? I was saying the same thing. How is it interest only? What's the payment? And on $100,000, our payment was like $300 a month or something like that, when the 100,000 was maxed. So of course you're not paying your 100,000 back. So that's just kind of, paying your interest. But for a short term needing cash, it's like the best tool that you can use, in our opinion.
What's a typical interest rate then, just for people to wrap their heads around, for if you're paying interest?
So they usually do like whatever prime is. It's usually like prime +1. So I think at that time ours was like 4.875. But like now they're like stupid low.
Yeah.
But at the time, this was 18, 24 months ago.
Cool. Wow. You want to dive into a little bit of like how your partnership works, how it functions together, that, and also because it's one thing to like buy these properties, but neither of you really come from a background. So it sounds like of doing these renovations. Like, how did you learn how to do all this? Or did you? Am I mistaken?
No. So Nick's dad has had his own business for years. And he was just like a carpenter, mason, a little bit of everything. So when we decided to do this, he, sad for us, at that point went into the union and started, building in Boston just commercially. And we were like, no, we need you. So he would kind of come after work, and he really was our saving grace and taught us everything we know. And I say us, meaning me. For some reason, the first day of like tearing apart the house, I just got like this high that I can't explain. And I was like, wow, I think I really like this. So him and I basically worked together. Nick definitely did a lot of the heavy lifting. But he would basically just yell at Nick, like, get the wheelbarrow. And then he'd explain to me why we're doing what we're doing. He'd be like, these LVLs up here. And I'm like, yeah, so that's kind of how that all started. And he, really taught us. And I think that hands-on experience was like the best thing we ever could have done, because now we say with this next one, I don't want to be on my hands and knees tiling a 3,000 square foot floor anymore. I'm okay with that now. But after doing it, I'm able to kind of oversee the subcontractors so much better than I think I ever would be able to, just having the experience and the work. But no, so we did technically come from the background, but they thought we were crazy. They weren't all for it.
No, yeah, they were like very against it. But I think, to your point, it was helpful to have someone who had some knowledge, like when he would come see it and be like, because when you're first starting out, like you think, like we would think the weirdest things were like catastrophic, and he'd be like,
that's literally us. That is literally us. We're like, oh, that's bad. And our contractor's like, dude, like that's $200. We're like,
yeah. So he, like, just having him with that. And then even like when we would hire people, like he would help be like the, vet them and make sure like, they were kind of like not taking advantage of us and stuff like that. So, it was he definitely is like a huge,
that's a huge asset to have, because a lot of people working with contractors is daunting. My dad's one too. So like he's helped me. It's funny, cut from the same cloth there, but it's like haggling people for a certain dollar amount. And like, I'm non-confrontational. So I'm like, dude, I just shoot me straight. Give me the lowest offer lowest price. And if you're good, I'll do it. Right. So it's annoying. We go through this all the time, but I want to dive in, cause you guys talked about this previously, like you forced appreciation. I guess it was on both properties. What advice can you give for people that are going through rehabs now? What are like maybe 3 main pillars or projects you can do to your house to force appreciation? Is it like, we keep hearing floors, bathroom, adding another room? Like, what have you seen based on your knowledge and experience, and maybe your dad's, of like, this should help bump your price up, because you've done it twice very successfully?
Yeah. So I'll start on like so I think the things we've seen is this is probably common sense, but I for us, we found it to be true, obviously, is the being able to add the living space. So we didn't increase the footprint, but we maximized, what was once unfinished to finished space. So, from an appraisal standpoint, now we got credit for more square footage, which put us in a different level of comps. And then the bedroom and bathroom count were huge on this property. For two reasons. One, like from the rent standpoint, like that first floor unit that we talked about, like when we bought it, it would have rented for like $2,200 to $2,400. And then
that's if we updated it. And then, we updated it and changed the footprint, and now it's 6,000. So I think like knowing that was huge. And then from the value standpoint, like again, now where we were being compared to like 7-bed, 4-bath houses versus like the 2-2 or whatever, 2-4. So it just kind of completely changed what we were as a house, really. Yeah.
When you rent that out, $6,000, this is like, I'm thinking to myself, and we're going through this now because we're going through a rehab where we're not going to add bedrooms, but we have the opportunity to potentially do so in the future. And I'm thinking like $6,000. So are you renting? Because you can own a lot for renting $6,000, right? Like, are you renting by the bedroom? How does that all shake out there?
It's one group of guys. They're all friends, and essentially it's $6,000, and they split it 5 ways, and we get one payment every month.
Got it.
From one of them. Yeah.
So they are renting essentially by the bedroom. That's how you can. Yeah. If you had a family in there, they may, for $6,000, they may go purchase something, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't want to get in like the true, like by the room type of thing, but this area again, and every city has one, but it's like that, where all the younger out of college, young professionals, they just want to live. So for us, it was actually, it wasn't very difficult trying to find a group of young, either, young male or females that wanted to live together, needed, that amount of bedrooms. And then the price, isn't too bad when you break it down to the per person price.
Right.
So what I'm gathering here is, if you can increase the square footage, you can add bedrooms, add bathrooms, right? Yeah. How about finishing? Like, does that play a difference? Is that like a small tweak, or is there some sort of like, I know some people use like a cookie cutter, like I use these floors, these tiles, this paint, these fixtures. You guys have like a plug and play there or no?
I would say, so for our rentals, we definitely have, I would say, higher end rentals. We're always putting in stainless steel French door for refrigerators and, quartz countertops. So for that, yes, for rentals, I definitely stick to the basics, but I'm happy to put in quartz countertops and then I'll just throw a subway tile backsplash on there instead of doing your 4-inch backsplash, because personally, not only does it look better, it's essentially the same cost in the material if I'm going to be tiling it, and then, which I want to get away from at some point, but that's kind of was my thought process. And it definitely does help the overall look. When the appraiser comes in, most every time I usually do the walkthroughs, and most every time they comment on something along the lines of, wow, this is nice for, the city, this area, a rental. And I think that definitely does help us.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that is like, I think it's always going to be market specific, right? Yeah. Like I think, we're trying to charge this type of rent, the tenant expects some level of finish to go along with that. If, if we were in a different market where, it's a much, much lower rent, then obviously we wouldn't even be having that conversation about those types of finishes. So I think just knowing like what the tenant base is and what the base level expectation would be for something at that price point.
And this is incredible. You use house hacking to get involved, and just to paint the picture for everyone. When people say, I live in New York, I live in Boston, I live in San Francisco, I can't invest in real estate. It's like, no, you're just not doing the right strategy, right? You're not looking for the $150,000 property. You may not find that, but house hacking and renovations and forced appreciation, and you're building this nice little portfolio for yourself. Yeah. So it's really cool. I want to talk about some of the systems that you use, because Nick is the loan officer and Sam is the GC, right? So it's like, my assumption there is that Nick runs a lot of the numbers, and then Sam does a lot of the structured how these renovations are going to look. Can you talk a little bit about that and just systems that go along to make sure that you're on budget and on time and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think from a high level standpoint, and again, we're definitely still learning and trying to get better all the time. So we by no means have it down to a science, but I think what we try to stick to is like one, again, just from the partnership standpoint, is we really try to stay in our lanes as much as possible. And I think like I spend a lot of my time trying to do due diligence on like, what's the property going to be worth, like future appraisal, ARVs, like rent, comps, all of that. Mm-hmm. And then, then I kind of pass that on to Sam, and then she'll kind of do all that. Like, okay, well, now we need to try to fit that into the renovation budget and all of that stuff. And then she kind of fills me in on it, but I'm not, super involved in all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk like I want to know what your criteria is for a good deal. So people that are in these expensive markets, they're like, okay, that's great. Like I hear the numbers, I hear 600,000, I hear 800,000, but like, how do you know if it's going to work?
Right. I mean, I think for us, a big thing, back to Nick's and all of your points, is let's try to find something that we can add value. And that's been, the number one thing. And that's what we're looking for moving forward as well is, that the basement of this current house hack definitely opened our eyes. I think, we knew it was going to, we say, quote, we knew it was going to work in the sense of we ran the numbers. Nick ran the numbers 10 times. I looked at it once and I was like, I know exactly how this is going to be set up. And I sketched it out for the architect and gave it to him. That part doesn't scare us as much as just kind of like having it all happen at the end. But adding the value really does. It's really hard to take a home that's, or let's take a place that's a 2-bed, 1-bath and just throw some granite countertops and change the fixtures in the bathroom and say, okay, now appraise me for enough for me to take cash out, because you have to, what is it, 80% owner occupied or 75?
Now 75
where we are. So I mean, you need to be able to push a lot of value into that, and oftentimes the fixtures or doing a bathroom isn't going to do that for you. So not being afraid to add value and knock down some walls. I mean, like I say it like that, but I mean, in every renovation we've done, I mean, we're redoing this whole like floor plan. So I want the bedroom to be the living room and the living room to be the bedroom. And this wall, I mean, where we're sitting right now used to be 3 rooms and now it's 1. So
right.
I think that's a big part of it.
That's interesting because you guys mentioned the floor plan a couple of times. We haven't really had anyone talk about that on our show yet. So how do you know, like, Sam, maybe you just have an eye for this thing, or I'm wondering like what training maybe you went through is like, how do you know what kind of layout of the house should be appropriate? And then like, all right, I know for a fact, not a fact, but like an educated guess, I think this is going to appraise